Hello, welcome to New Gameplay Today. I am your host, Wesley LeBlanc, and today I'm joined by Game Informer's very own Kyle Hilliard.
Hello.
And we are joined by a very special guest, Jesse Vitelli from Prima Games. How you doing?
Good. How's it going, everybody?
It is going great, and that is because we are checking out Final Fantasy XVI. I went hands-on recently for about 2 hours with this game, and Jesse did too. We were at the same event. And what you're going to be watching here today is essentially what we played through, at least like the first bit of what we played through. Jesse, just right off the top of your head, like what are your thoughts on Final Fantasy 16? Do you like it? Do you not like where it's going? What are you thinking?
I really like it. It feels, the combat feels visceral in a way that I'm excited about. I feel like they finally got the action combat, correct. They've been doing a couple different styles of combat over the years, and I feel like this one is really clicked with me, and I'm excited.
Yeah, a big part of that I think is Ryoto Suzuki's. He's the combat director, and he has history with 20 years at Capcom designing combat on games like Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Devil May Cry 5, and for me at least, this game, like the Devil May Cry isms in this game are very apparent. Like I wrote in my preview, if you're a fan of Devil May Cry, you're going to feel right at home with this combat. It's fast-paced, it's combo-heavy, and Jesse, I think you actually put a story out this morning that said there's going to be an arcade mode with the game too, right?
Yeah, so, we had a chance to talk to the dev team a little bit, and they were mentioning that for players who want like more of a challenge and some post-game stuff, they're going to be having a bunch of different game modes similar to Devil May Cry in a lot of ways. And there's going to be an arcade mode where you can go for a high score, and there'll be global leaderboards, and you can sort of try to get the best score out of your friends and everyone else, and really kind of master the combat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're looking for that kind of like grade after your combat, that's going to be an arcade mode thing. So Kyle, tell me your history with Final Fantasy.
Oh man, it's a weird one. I kind of consider myself a recent fan, if that makes sense. Like
Okay.
I have always dabbled with Final Fantasy, even back to like the Super Nintendo days, but never really finished any of them. And then Final Fantasy 15 was actually the first one I saw credits on, despite having played every other one at some capacity. And then I played Remake 2, or sorry, 7 Remake. I don't know why I said Remake 2, but... And so like, with the announcement of 16, I was kind of like, all right, I consider myself a fan now. I'm excited for this. And like the wild thing about watching this, I just have so many questions right off the bat, is like, if I didn't know this was Final Fantasy, I would not have guessed this was a Final Fantasy game. Like that combat just looked like straight up action. There were like there were QTEs to pass through the doors. It looks like you have a pet wolf. I thought you had like a little Ocarina of Time style Navi at the beginning, but I guess that was just like a lamp or something that you turned off and you didn't need it anymore.
Yeah, you can press, I forget the button, but you press the button and it kind of guides you where to go. I don't think it's like a being or anything. Correct me if I'm wrong,
It's just
Jesse,
a little flame.
No, it's just
But
like...
I appreciate that like they can go in so many weird directions. Like it's like, why not? Yeah, this is the 16th entry. Like, do something crazy. Like, make it a Devil May Cry game. Why not?
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of the dog, you mentioned Torgal is the name of the dog, and I didn't really rely on him or use him too much in my preview. There's a support accessory, which we'll talk about here soon, that lets the dog just basically automatically attack, or you can kind of choose what he does. At least for me, I didn't worry about him too much, although he seems like a nice companion. Jesse, did you what were your thoughts on Torgal?
Yeah, so one of the big things is like for this game is like you don't have like a set party. Your party kind of like comes and goes as the story dictates it. But Torgal is like your constant companion, so you get a little bit of control over him. And so yeah, you can see kind of on the D-pad in the bottom left, like you have a few different options, and it's neat. It's one of those things where I didn't use it a lot, but I can see with the way that this combat is set up that people will find really interesting ways to add Torgal into their combos. Mm-hmm. And sort of like, oh, I did this sick air juggle, and then I had Torgal come in and bite the enemy, and that extended my combo and do things like that. But I think as like a for like most people who are just playing through for the story, Torgal's best ability is that it can heal you.
Yes.
That's
But Torgal's like always with you, just like around, right?
Yeah. Well,
because
for
that's
what we
like
played. Yeah.
I mean, that is like a video game like 101 trick, right? Like Ocarina of Time, even like Ico and stuff like that. Like giving you a partner character to like make you feel like you're not going through the adventure alone, even if they're just like kind of present, is so valuable, you know?
Yeah, and you can pet Torgal as well, which obviously is very important. I mean, this would be probably
Got to get on that Twitter account. If you're
Yeah.
not on that Twitter account, are you even a video game at this point?
exactly. That was I think we talked with or Naoki Yoshida, the producer on the game, gave a presentation. I think he like mentioned that pretty right up front when he started talking about Torgal. So they're definitely aware that the Twitter account exists.
It was like bullet
as
point
important.
2 on the list was like, yes, you could
Yeah.
you could pet Torgal.
Yeah, and so I want to point out so we talked about Torgal on the bottom left of the screen. On the bottom right is kind of now we've got this pop up on screen, but the bottom right is your like combat menu basically that you're going to be. It changes a lot on the fly, at least with the way I played. So basically, in combat, you've got your standard like melee attacks. You have your magic, which is you press triangle and it just kind of shoots it like a ranged attack. Kind of reminds me of Final Fantasy XV's ranged magic. And then the most important part to your combat is the abilities attached to each icon. So I tried to find out why Clive, the protagonist, has access to these iconic abilities. Because Clive is not a dominant, and a dominant in the world of Final Fantasy XVI means you can like become a summon, an icon basically. Clive is not one, but he's still able to use iconic abilities. They basically told me I got to play through the story to find out. But each icon that you tap into right now, it's Phoenix, and then we had access to Garuda and Titan. They each have a ability that you can use with circle on your controller. And the Phoenix's is like a quick like teleport dash. Jesse, you wrote in your preview that's kind of like Noctis's.
Like warp strike sort of situation.
That is, I love that mechanic. That's cool. That it's coming back even in a small way.
Yeah, it's a really nice way to extend your combo. Like especially if you're about to defeat an enemy and you want to get right to the next enemy before the combo's over, that's like perfect for closing the distance. And then the Garuda has a similar ability, but it uses its claws to like bring an enemy closer to you. And then the Titan brings up like a shield that just blocks most incoming damage. For me, those abilities were super, super important to like continue my combo chains. And I think it's just like a fun addition to the combat, which is already, probably the most fast-paced in Final Fantasy mainline history, at least.
It's got to be, right? I mean, 15 and 7 remake are pretty fast, but I don't. This looks like a straight up action game to me. You guys had the controllers in your hand, so maybe it feels different, but from the outside, it looks like an action game.
100%. Like it the way this thing flows is straight out of like you really feel Ryota Suzuki's presence in this game for sure. Like it is a Devil May Cry combat system in all of like the best ways from what we've played. And something that was really interesting, Wes brought up the Garuda sort of grapple, pull the enemy to you. And there's like really interesting things you can do where you can like juggle air juggle an enemy, jump up, and if the enemy like falls to the ground, you can use the Garuda claw to like pull them back up into the air. So you can extend your combos in like really wild ways. It feels like a game that is very easy to pick up, but has an incredibly high skill ceiling.
Yeah.
And that is a really interesting way to go with Final Fantasy combat.
Yeah, I think in one of my stories going up today, which by the time you're watching this is probably already on GameInformer.com, but Suzuki said like one of the ways that they designed combat was like a really low floor to enter and then a very high ceiling for like mastering the game, which it's if you've played Devil May Cry, you kind of already are familiar with that. If you want to just mash some buttons and look cool while doing it, the game lets you do that. But if you're someone who wants to get like the triple S grade or whatever at the end of combat, you can do that. And I think that's exactly what Final Fantasy XVI's trying to do. For me, actually, I played Devil May Cry 5 like a year ago, maybe. And I think I'm liking the way the combat feels in this game even more, to be honest. It might be because I am just more familiar with the Final Fantasy series and I like the way it's working here. But I don't know. I felt better with the way I was able to go from enemy to enemy.
Yeah,
And what you're saying is like, for those people who love Final Fantasy, who play the MMO, who like turn-based combat, like you can get away with just kind of tapping X if you don't want to engage with it too much, right?
Yeah, there's actually they're called timely support accessories, which are kind of the team's way at adding like built-in accessibility, because there's not an easy mode or a medium or a hard mode. There's like a story mode basically and an action mode. And these accessories you equip as pieces of your gear, and they change the way combat works. And for example, Kyle, what you just mentioned, there's one piece of gear, the name I'm blanking on right now, but it makes it so where all you have to do combos is press square. So you can just press square and Clive will perform these really awesome, fantastic combos that, you would have to be pressing a ton of buttons otherwise to perform. And it doesn't change, any aspect of like it's not going to make the game lesser or better than, like, it's just if you don't want to focus on trying to do all these combos with different buttons and switching weapon wheels and all that, like you can just press one button and get away with it, which I thought was a really nice touch. Did you get to try that, Jesse?
Yeah, so I played around with a lot of the timely support accessories up front to try and just see what they all did. And the auto combo one reminds me a lot of like Dragon Ball Fighter and some of these other fighting games that have implemented like the auto combo system that makes you do cool flashy stuff without having to be a master of the game, and you still feel like you're like doing this incredible combo and doing all of these things, and you're able to just do it at your own pace. And there's a few other ones. There was one that like will automatically use a potion when your health drops below a certain threshold, so you don't have to worry about healing.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
It was nice. The problem I ran into a little bit was that the threshold was pretty low, so it ended up using all of my potions pretty early on. And so when I got into some of the harder fights in the demo, I was like, oh no, I'm out of healing items. I need to turn this accessory off. Yeah. It keeps using all my potions. And there's a few other ones that I played around with a little bit, but I wanted to turn them off after a while and just really see how that combat feels without any added support.
Yeah, there's another one that basically right before an enemy's attack lands with you, it slows the game down, but it basically pauses, and it lets you hit the dodge button like much easier. It shows like a big red circle that disappears over time, and you have that much time to press R1 to dodge super easily, which is nice because you'll be dodging a lot. And then trying to think of what the other one.
Oh, there we go. Look at that.
Perfect. Look at that. Yeah, that's I think that might have actually been a QTE in the. Yeah, this is like a QTE
that'll show up in like proper combat as well.
Yeah, that exact same R1 thing will show up. It'll just be a little less cinematic.
They have these things called cinematic strikes, which are their QTEs, and some of them will be, oh, you hit square and you'll like attack and do this thing, and then other ones are like hit R1 and you'll dodge, and you get points for them on the side. You can see the names of things popping up.
Mm-hmm. What's the dog's name? Is it Torgal? Is that what you said?
Torgal.
I cannot not see Twilight Princess Wolf Link. Like, it just looks so close to it. I think even some of the coloring is the same. But every time it kind of pops up in the background of a cutscene as we're watching this, I'm like, oh, Wolf Link is here. That's weird. What's he doing in this one?
I wish I would have noticed that, because it is like more similar than not. I wonder if that's a nod to that or something. I
don't know.
Yeah, so one thing I want to point out here that we haven't touched on is so we talked about the iconic abilities that you use with Circle, which lets you, do the dash teleport or use Garuda's Claws to draw enemies in. But you can also equip with each Titan, or with each icon you have on your weapon wheel down there. Right now it's Titan. You have like 2 abilities you can use. The Titans is like a big rock hammer, which is probably my favorite, because when you use it, you have to hold down. Was it R2, Jesse?
Yeah, it was the strike button.
Yeah, you use R2 wheel, and then a wheel pops up, and if you let go of R2 while the wheel is at like a certain area, it does like extra damage, which it feels good. It's nice to have a little timeliness added into those combos like that. And then the Phoenixes were just kind of like these big, flashy, like fiery AoE kind of attacks, where you can like pulverize an enemy into the air. And then I don't actually remember what Garuda's abilities were.
The claws that spin around you and throw an enemy
That's
up
right.
into the air. And then the other one that's just like a rapid strike claw attack. It was like very, very fast paced Garuda attacks.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, you can equip 2 of those at a time. I kind of messed around in the menus a bit. We couldn't really do too much to change anything, but yeah, each icon has a weapon wheel or like a RPG skill wheel attached to it, and you unlock things through that. And so, your Titan wheel can have its own things, your Phoenix wheel can have its own things, and your Garuda one can as well. I'm excited to see how deep those go and how many icons we have access to.
There was a moment when I was playing the preview where I was messing around with some of the skill tree, and there were like during the preview there was like every icon had like an additional ability that you could add or like swap out for, and one of Titan's was this thing called Rage Fist, which was you just started like doing like 100 punches like Dragon Ball Z style, where you're just like kind of wailing on an enemy. And I was told that if you parry with that, and I started to do it, it has its own unique animation for like a counter attack. So a lot of these icon abilities actually, if you use them to parry an enemy, will have its own unique animation and then go into like another fight form, if you will. And so the Rage Fist will like block and then you'll do like 10 extra punches on it, so you automatically get like a free counter attack on an enemy. And that's when my eyes kind of opened up and I was like, oh, there's a lot more going on under the surface of this thing.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. I didn't even realize that, or I might have not even done that once.
I had to have someone tell me to do that because I didn't know immediately.
Yeah, one thing you just said, like, there's a lot going on with this combat. Like, I feel like we have barely scratched the surface of where this combat is going. I mean, Final Fantasy is about story and music and scenery and all that kind of stuff, but like the combat here really does feel like the focus, more so than any recent Final Fantasy game I've played. Of course, we played 2 hours, so maybe that's why I'm not really getting too much story and whatnot yet, but I think that the team is really leaning into Suzuki's combat here.
Yeah, I'd asked about some of the RPG elements and sort of story around the combat, and they were very much like, oh, this preview was very focused on the combat, but the scenes before and after this dungeon that you played are very story and RPG sort of side content focused. Mm-hmm. And so that stuff is definitely in there, it sounds like. But they were like, yeah, no, we really just wanted to focus on getting everybody acclimated to this new combat system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so like, are you someone with Final Fantasy where you kind of yearn for it to be turn-based again, or are you on board with this? I mean, it's been shifting to action like this for, I don't know, a decade now.
Yeah, I definitely like turn-based combat, but I think in more modern iteration, like especially after 7 Remake and how good that combat felt, and sort of just the flow of it, not that they had to prove to me, but it felt like they proved to me like, no, we can do like real-time like action combat. And then with this there was like, no, look, we can really do action combat. And so yeah. I'm happy with this change. I'm cool with it. Do I want it forever? Maybe not, but for this one I'm on board.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems like it doesn't feel like necessarily that this is like an indictment of Final Fantasy, like it's going to be full action moving forward. I think it's just that you bring on Suzuki, like you make it Devil May Cry-esque. Like, why hire that kind of talent and then not utilize their best efforts? And I think that's just part of how this game came to be so action heavy.
Yeah, they had mentioned in the interview that younger audiences are not necessarily playing a lot of Final Fantasy, and so it was kind of finding that way to bridge the gap between like veteran fans and a newer audience, and how action combat, the feedback is immediate. Everything there's this immediacy to it, and the team was like, this feels like the right step, and you know what, they're doing a cool thing.
It's funny, not that I had any doubt that this was Benedikta was a villain. But they're like, just to make sure you guys know, she's gonna hit the dog.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, she this fight was probably my favorite thing that we played through. One, because it was, for me at least, the most challenging combat scenario, and then I also just like, it's doing so much that I'm not used to in a Final Fantasy. Like, they're like, you can block or you can dodge these attacks. Like, it's almost, I don't want to be the guy that's mentioning a Souls game, you know, every time they compare a game, but like, it reminds me of the types of boss fights where you need to like focus on their patterns and their moves and figure out, okay, what's coming next? Is this a parry or should I dodge this? Where do I go when this magic hits? And I really, really like that feeling in combat. It's nice. I'm just not used to that in Final Fantasy, like analyzing a boss and learning their moves. Final Fantasy bosses have always kind of been like a war of like attrition for me. Like, it's just survive, especially in Final Fantasy VII Remake. So I'm really liking the direction these boss fights are going.
Yeah, something that's interesting, and we saw it a little bit in the last fight, and you see it again here, is some of the moves are like very animation based, but then a lot of them have like telegraphed AoE markers, which is like a very MMO Final Fantasy XIV thing, where it is like, we are going to tell you very explicitly where this attack is going to land. And I really appreciate that, especially in a very fast-paced action game where it's like, oh, there's a lot of visual noise on the screen, and I need to be able to legibly understand where I need to stand to not get hit. And so it kind of, threads the needle of like, yes, you need to pay attention to the characters' animations, but at the same time, we are also going to help you out a little bit by very clearly telegraphing where some of these attacks will go.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And yeah, kind of alluding to the MMO. You know, this is obviously not an MMO, but that's what Yoshida's most known for, is Final Fantasy XIV. But there's like a surprising amount of Final Fantasy XIV like vibes in this game so far. Obviously the music, it's the same composer. And then like, especially the cinematic attacks, I forget the name of them, but like, it feels like they're crafting the combat to feel like a Final Fantasy XIV cutscene. And I really, really like it.
It's a totally unique universe, right? It's not connected to 14's universe, right?
It's its own thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that's like, I almost feel it's like a dumb question for Final Fantasy, but like, right, 12 is kind of like kind of in that world. Like, occasionally there'll be some like direct lines, but very rarely.
Yeah, there's like some 13, like its world has some interesting connections to other stuff, but 16 is like completely its own thing. It appears. I mean, it's a brand new world, new continent, new land, new nations, and all that.
Yeah, I mean, look, this woman has 2 wings. Like, that's different from Final Fantasy of the past. Usually, you only have one.
Just one wing.
Completely different.
When will they have 3 wings?
Of course, saying her name over and over.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a shortcoming. I mean, if we're gonna be honest.
Yeah, true. Yeah, and so as we wrap up this Benedikta boss fight, that's going to be the end of today's NGT. But I just want to remind everybody, you can read my preview on GameInformer.com, and you can read Jesse's on Prima Games.com, right? Yes. And he's got his thoughts. There's my thoughts. You can read a ton of Final Fantasy XVI today. So like, if you're wanting more of this game, it's out there. There's lots of good previews out there, and we know a lot of people who've written some great ones too. So be sure to check it out. Final Fantasy XVI comes out on PS5 exclusively on June 22nd, 2023. For more content, keep it locked on GameInformer.com, and go check out Prima Games too. Kyle and Jesse, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Wes.
Bye, everyone.